All right, let's get you a broad take about what happens next. Bring in our politics reporter, Ziyanda Ngcobo, who's live to us now from our studios this morning. Great to see you, Ngcobo. And, you know, we've been counting down to this moment for quite some time. But perhaps let's distill what we're actually anticipating to take place now that this process has officially begun.
So now's the time to actually sift through what people are shouting from, their rooftops through the media and what the branches of the ANC are going to pronounce on. We've been hearing names, being bandied about. And I heard you speaking earlier this morning, and indeed it is looking like the most hotly contested position this year will be that of deputy president, because it would seem, at least for now, that the position of president is almost a foregone conclusion, that the president will get a second term. So what happens now? It means that the branches of the ANC will sit and send through their names to the regional secretaries, and then it will feed into, to province and ultimately at national. It's that process then, of course, then where we know there'll be the nominations for NEC members, but also critically the top 6 positions, Ayanda.
Yeah, and there are, let's call them prerequisites along the way for who can be nominated. What do we know about what those entail?
All right, so we actually do have some boards if the team can bring them up, because there are several things that you would need to qualify. So the branches must, of course, approach the leadership selection with political analysis and integrity. And you know that you also can't be facing charges, and we know that step aside then principle is going to be a topic of discussion. I think even more so now that we see that the murder charges against someone like Mandla Msibi in Mpumalanga have been dropped, and he's now back to acting as a provincial treasurer there. And of course, the public face of the ANC must reflect values of non-racialism, non-sexism, and represent the diversity of South Africa. That's a very critical point, Ayanda, because we know that the issue of the zebra approach has been something that's long been discussed within the ANC, but has not necessarily been implemented. If we look at how the provincial conferences and the top 5 officials have been going about, you usually find one woman within the top structures of the organization. The youth mix, the youth component, the generational mix, I should say, is still something that is a topic of discussion. In fact, it's exactly why we hear the names of Mamuluko Kubai and Ronald Lamola being bandied about to become deputy presidents. You must also have a leadership that has political capacity, and you must appoint agencies and list committees to assist with implementing the election processes, and you must also oversee the implementation of rules by the constitutional structures of the ANC. This is also very critical because we know that the rules become important when it comes to who is meant to be there in terms of the delegates at the conference. Credentials, that's something that we've also seen being a topic of discussion. I think what's also interesting, Ayanda, about this process is that whilst you can have the branch nominations process, I think one thing I've observed throughout these conferences is that the branches are now using more and more, the ability to be able to nominate from the floor. In fact, it would seem that it's actually part of a strategy by a faction within the African National Congress to sort of let the branch nominations take place, and then during the horse trading processes, during conference, things can change completely.
Yeah, and that usually really does throw a spanner in the works because it almost feels like everything is up for grabs. But it was interesting what Mtolo had to say earlier on today. He spoke about the need for leadership at province levels to not preempt what branches ought to say by pronouncing ahead of this branch process you've just explained so well actually kicking off. I wonder to what extent that may have a bearing on how branches feel in the lead up to December itself, especially those branches that aren't in agreement necessarily with what leadership at provincial level is saying.
I mean, there's an age-old saying, Amandla Semaseben, the power lies within the branches. And what we've been seeing, and it's something that many provinces have decried, is sort of the imposing of a leadership on the branches of the ANC. And Kwazulu-Natal, you'll know, they defied that. The Musa-Dladla region, the top 3 positions there, that being of the chair, the deputy chair, and that of the secretary, were were nominated from the floor, because there was a sense that the names that had been touted at the time were being imposed on the branches of the ANC. The same applies with the KZN provincial conference, etc. So I'm not surprised that Bheki Mtolo would say that to give the branches space to do so, but that's not quite what usually happens. You know, the PECs have already been making pronouncements, whether it's in Limpopo, whether it's the Eastern Cape that says it will be supporting Gwede Mantashe to become chair, whether it's, you know, in provinces such as Mpumalanga as well that have pronounced. That could change. That's why I'm saying it would seem for now that, you know, for instance, the position of president is a foregone conclusion, but that might not be what the branches of the ANC have to say going into this process.
Yeah, my goodness. And given how the past 5 years have fared, we know anything is possible, at least with the governing party. Ziyanda Ngcobo, for now, thanks very much indeed. Of course, there's a lot more to be said about this process. We'll keep taking it in bite sizes for you in the lead up to December itself, when the real work, some may argue, finally begins. Ziyanda Ngcobo, of course, is our politics reporter.